Ooh, is everyone back? Leslie, thank you for that. It just put me in a space where, not that I was in a bad space or a wilderness experience, but I was just sort of thinking, I've planned a talk and I've got my notes, but anything could happen. And would you believe, in the middle of the week, that shocking week we had where I was an hour away from bushfires and things like that, and I did a lot of praying, and of course everyone met in the evening at the hotel to encourage one another over a glass of wine, and everyone was there. The fire brigade said hello, and it built up an absolute team spirit in the middle of this little tiny town. Anyway, I went back home and I found my copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I've had this book since I was about 20. I got it from the dear old Theosophical Society, which is still going in Melbourne somewhere. I still haven't checked out where now because they have moved. And it had, great things like, myself when young did eagerly frequent doctor and saint and heard great argument about it and about but evermore. Came out I by the same door as I went in. Little pithy sayings like that. And it's got some great illustrations. And I was just looking through, Leslie, I wasn't going to do this, but your meditation inspired me. And it does lead into the wilderness experience. Fill the cup. What boot it is to repeat. How time is slipping under our feet. Unborn tomorrow and dead yesterday, why fret about them if today be sweet? Now, today can be sweet or it can be sour, and it's the topic of my talk, the wilderness experience, and how did we come across this expression? Well, as some of you may know, from the 14th of February, we entered the Lenten season, which was a 40-day period leading up to Easter Sunday. And from Matthew 4, verse 1 and 2, then was Jesus led up into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And we know that that is just the negative side of the one presence and one power, which we use. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he hungered. But in a modern translation of the Bible, I think it was the Message, it said 40 days and 40 nights, he was famished, which is a little bit more modern in the language and makes a bit more sense, even though I do love the old King James versions. Now, Lent is an early Christian tradition and still continues in mainstream churches. This is in memory of the time that Jesus spent in the wilderness, preparing for his mission as the Christ. A song we used to sing here from our wonderful songbooks, which in emergencies we know they're in the cupboard and we can drag them out. Come ye a part of wild rest, into this mountain be blessed, into that high and holy place that God himself has blessed. So the symbolism is amazing because during Christmas we acknowledge the Christ child within, and between Christmas and Lent we've allowed this idea of self to take hold, this new idea of who we really are. And we nurture this by giving expression to it and aiming to give up all that does not support us on this inner journey, which isn't an easy thing. Somehow along the way, we've tended to become like a spider caught up in our own web. Now we can take time to consciously unravel ourselves from the results of our own unlimited thinking. And as I've said before, enlightenment can be a two-way street. It can be hallelujah, Gabriel blowing the horn, and everything is wonderful. I see the light, but you also see the darkness that you've managed to live through and acknowledge. And that is enlightenment, because if we didn't know, we'd keep on repeating these same things that we've looked back, especially in our youth, and I think, my God, I could have handled that a lot better. And that can cause a wilderness experience. It can cause pain in us. And it really is not very nice. Some people make amends with their friends. They ring them up and say, look, I'm sorry, and all that sort of stuff. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because most of them have passed on now anyway. But we also have this moment in time to decide where we're going to come from. So our enlightenment, as I said, is a two-way street. Now, some dedicated early Christians set out away from the towns and cities into the wilderness to be able to concentrate on living the spiritual teachings away from the masses. As you know, I've got a little place away from everyone. It's a country town. But as people say, Emerson was the one that said it, wherever you go, you take yourself with you. And that is a wonderful thing. Even at Unity Village when I was there, and I thought, well, here I am. So what's different? Really, you take yourself, and I did manage to get into the flow. The heat, as I was telling Stephanie, was terrible in Kansas, and that's where you come from, isn't it? Kansas, yes, somewhere. So the heat was terrible, but that was only that day. Sometimes it can be freezing cold, and there are actually tunnels under the village so that they can walk when it's too hot. Now, this sort of getting away from it into the wilderness is nothing new. It happened about the 3rd century. These anchorites, that's what they call them, and I love that word, who live apart in hermitages and in the hearts of Egypt, Palestine and Judea. And does anyone know the most famous anchorite or desert father? Stuart, I thought you'd know that. Oh. No one knows it? No, St. Anthony. So now, yes, he was the first one, and they lived in the desert. Apart from the state of mind, they lived in an actual wilderness experience. In these bleak surroundings, they tested their bodies and minds in the most severe ways. Really, and some people still today, in some religions, do terrible things to their bodies. Do you remember the film The Da Vinci Code? There was a monk in that, and he used to walk around with a ring of steel. It's called a cilice. And every time you moved, there'd be a pain, to remind himself to keep his mind on God. Well, most of us have got our pains and things now anyway. So we don't need one of those things. Anyway, where would you buy them? If I went into the Catholic bookshop in the city and said, could I have a cilice, please? Oh, my goodness. And also, they would whip themselves. So I don't know whether they've got a back section in the shop that sells those sort of things. So,
very different kind of shop. You should know anything about those kind of shops, young man.
I'm talking about the religious side of things. I'm being taken apart here, everyone. Okay. Yeah. Well, you've got to have a bit of humour, because we do have our bleak experiences. And this is what we're here to do. This is our mystery school. And it has ups and downs, blessings and challenges. And I mentioned the 4 agreements, which I've actually put this in for later, but each stage of our life has its experiences. And the older we get, sometimes you think, the worse it is. But you look back when you were young and you think, I was worried about that, I didn't have to be. Same with that era, and that era. Anyway, practicing isolation is okay, but I think we learn more from people in our day-to-day life, in the marketplace of life. We might have, in one lifetime, had this experience, and some people might need it. But at my stage, and possibly the stage a lot of you are at now, we do it by putting our faith into operation right here and right now. But thanks to the courage and wisdom of our earlier way showers, the teachings of the ancient wisdom have been revealed to us. Yet this will only happen when we are ready. So we seek, and ye shall find. That meditation this morning was perfect for this, because we know the story of the prodigal son. He had everything. He took the wealth, his inheritance, and went off. Had a wonderful life for a time, and then, boom, it all hit the fan. So one day he thought, what do I do now? I can't do anything. I'm not feeling well. This is terrible. No one wants me anymore or likes me. And I've just burnt all my bridges. So he sat down and rested in a quiet place. And his inner voice was there, waiting for this moment to pop in and say, come home. And so he went back to his father. Now we know the metaphysical side of this. He went and connected with his higher self, and somehow he realised from his experience what these laws were and how they're demonstrated by our thinking, and what we think comes into our lives. So he had to change his thinking to change his life. I don't know where this came from, but I should, because it's a great saying. God made us the perfect self. God did not make us the perfect tree, but the perfect seed. God did not make us as we might have been, but as we might become. And we don't have a timeline on this because it's in our consciousness that this happens. We can't say, I'm doing it at Lent, can't say I'm doing it at Christmas, but it doesn't matter. Those traditions are good because it gives us a systematic way of working through, especially with over the last 2,000 years, to put those teachings into practice, and people that weren't quite ready for it at least go through the physical motions of the 4 weeks of Christmas and the 4 weeks of Lent. It sows seeds over time. So it is in consciousness, not time, that our perfection is realised. And this has to come before that. And I was telling someone the other day, the music of today, we've got the Taylor Swift phenomena at the moment. Everyone is going berserk and she's laughing all the way to her banks. And, you know, someone asked me what sort of music I listen to. I don't know about you, but I agreed with this person. I hardly listen to anything now. I love my silence, but I pick what I want to listen to. And, you know, sometimes I have the ABC Classic FM on in the background, and it was going through a terrible stage at one thing. Something's happened. They've tidied it up. And they're playing a little bit more melodic music that I used to know, and a few old favourites. I think they're listening to the public. And sometimes if there's a song I want, I just turn it up and then turn it down afterwards. So this had to go before that in our fashions. Look what we wear. And my generation are called the baby boomers. Well, aren't the young people lucky that we were, because otherwise they would have been it. And it would have been their turn in the long run. Now the revealing word, which is down in the back there, reveals wilderness as such. In individual consciousness, the wilderness is a symbol of the multitude of undisciplined thoughts and uncultivated thoughts. Now, as we evolve, we find that our new awareness has to compete for dominance with the prevailing thoughts and feelings that have been part of us up until this time. Unity writer, one of my favourites, always will be, regardless, Catherine Ponder, and it's also in the writings of Emily Cady. She calls this, does anyone know? Chemicalisation. Isn't it a horrible word? Chemicalisation. There's got to be a better word around somewhere. We've all heard it said that things have to get worse before they get better. That in the getting worse process is actually a part of the improvement process, that what seems like a failure is actually success being born in the situation. Chemicalization means that things are coming out in a better state than ever before. Us poor mortals, whether we like it or not, we'll have to go through this experience of ups and downs, rich or poor. It happens to us all. That's what we're here for. But whatever happens, and regardless of what seems to be happening, it never means anything else, because in this wilderness we use this time in the power to use our affirmations and denials, but we use them with feeling. And it's so good to know that one positive thought is more powerful than 1,000 rowdy negative thoughts. The old way of thinking is on its way out. But no matter how much noise it makes in the process, it has to go. But having been in control for so long, it's not going to go without a fight. And here's where our wonderful Unity metaphysical teachings come to help us. The Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Moses saying to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." That's in the Hebrew Scriptures, as we call it in Unity. Others call it the Old Testament. Moses metaphysically means drawing out, extracting. Pharaoh is the king, the sun, the ruler of the solar plexus, the sun centre in the subconscious part of our mind. And we all know when our subconscious or our solar plexus is playing up, it's not pleasant. It's happened to me a couple of dramatic times, very dramatic, and this solar plexus mood kept happening and going through me, and I eventually got rid of it and calmed down. But it took a lot of firm affirmations and denials in true feeling, strong feeling. So Moses had to go before Pharaoh and beg to let my people go. Those old thoughts, Pharaoh represents the old thoughts that have been in power. Moses wanted to get out and Pharaoh wouldn't let him. So eventually it happened. Moses persisted and persisted and persisted until Pharaoh gave up. But even then, Pharaoh had a change of mind and came back, but Moses managed to escape. Though it is an uncomfortable experience, it is worth going through, because it's a sign that expansion in awareness is occurring and that something better will result from the experience. Now, we may not all be able to go to a desert place to be alone in the wilderness, but we have a place in us where we aim to commune and listen for guidance from our own higher self, which will speak to us in ways we can understand. It'll speak to me differently than it'll speak to you. Meditation is wonderful because even though you're sitting there for your 20 minutes or half hour, nothing may be happening. But it is. Spirit has gone before us, and you might find things in your daily life a little bit different. Amazing coincidences, little messages that pop up. And I know some of you here are interested in getting rid of the old and into the new. I was sitting down at a restaurant and looked out the window, and a big truck went past which says, "If you've got junk, ring such and such and such and such." So I had a whole heap of rubbish, so I rang them, and they came. Little things like that, which had that not have happened, I would have put it off for another probably month or so. Now, we may not be able to go into the desert and pray and fast physically, but we can use these affirmations and denials constantly over the Lent experience. The middle of Tasmania is an interesting place. My stepbrother at the time, this is a while back now, was one of the head guides, and he had this Rambo helicopter with no doors, and he took us up with him, a couple of people, into the centre of Tasmania, because there are huts all over the place, And the rangers in the huts need to be relieved of their task for a while. So he left me there. I was there for about 4 to 5 hours. And it was amazing, in the middle of this magnificent wilderness. Well, it was a gentle wilderness, really. Mind you, there are other parts in Tasmania that are not, but I think he realised he better be a bit kind to me. He left me in one of the easier huts, but there was silence. Then as I thought there, I could hear things. It was like you could hear all the stuff that's in the airwaves. It was probably the thoughts that are in my mind that I'm not even aware of, but they're there. And I got a lot from that experience. And it was worth the effort of spending that time alone. And I'll always thank him for that. So when things are going well, it's fine. When they're not, we have those moments. Let's be kind to ourselves when we do. Because, we're going to get out of it. But it can take time sometimes, and some people may not. And, I've talked to a few people over the years who are really, really sad about life and things like that, but they don't put the effort in to making any difference to themselves. It's the same old conversation. So if it's happening to us, just know that God created every good thing. And he created this earth, and as Leslie was saying in that wonderful poem, look what we've got here. There was a group there that wouldn't take medication at one stage. The Christian Science didn't at one particular point. And so therefore, they believed they could do it by themselves. Some could, some couldn't. Some weren't ready for it. Some died. But God gave us medicine and doctors. God gave us that. Isn't it wonderful to prolong this and help us through these times? So without overdoing it, we can balance these things out in our life. My Rubaiyat. I'm going to finish on this little verse. Here they talk about wine and things like that. Wine is spirit. Not when you're 20, but as you get older, you can realise that all this is about spirit. And I noticed here the connection between the Last Supper and the verse here. And this is years before the Last Supper. This is probably an old Sufi Persian poet, Omar Khayyam. And in the Last Supper, we talk about the bread and the wine. And we know the metaphysical meaning. I'm not going into it now because that can happen Easter Sunday. But here it is, from way, way back. Here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness, and wilderness is paradise now. Thank you. Oh dear, who would